the hardship, when people talk about the journey, it's all about the journey. It's not about the reward. The journey is the reward. I realized that when you're working on fitness or health, it's the day-to-day, it's the mundane that is the life.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm really excited to have on Sergei Boutenko. Welcome to the show, Sergei.
Thanks for having me, Mason. I have a buddy named Jason. This is Mason. It's going to be fun.
And similar last name too, as you were mentioning pre-call. So, Sergei is a documentarian, if that's the right word, also an author and a wild foraging expert. So, and as I was doing some research for the show, we have a lot in common. So I'm really excited to delve into some of these topics. And first and foremost, I am an Oregonian, and I was just kind of curious, where are you from?
That's a hard question for me to answer because I was born in Russia and I've lived all over the world, but I consider Ashland, Oregon home. So Southern Oregon, Southwest Oregon. And I currently live in Medford, just 10 miles north of Ashland. So
beautiful, beautiful.
Your neck of the woods on the same street as you were born, probably on I-5.
Yep, very similar. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, as a lot of the audience knows, but I absolutely love it there. Now I'm based in Wisconsin, so here we go. So how did you get into this whole health journey or wild foraging in general?
Two separate stories. The health journey kind of happened when I was young. Basically, we immigrated to the US from Russia in 1990. America was like this whole new place. It was like magic land. We went from standing in really long lines and having nothing in the grocery store to having everything at our fingertips. So we started eating the standard American diet because we thought America's like at the apex of everything that is scientific and thus good for you. And within a few short years, everybody in my family got sick. We went to modern medicine and they told us that we can't do anything for you. You guys have pretty major health issues. And so you could take these drugs for the rest of your life and you'll never get better, which didn't really sound like a good idea. And then our other option was to try and figure it out on our own. And so my parents took it into their own hands. I was only 9 years old at the time, so I didn't know what was happening. And that led us on a journey that made us swing the pendulum in the complete opposite direction. We became raw food vegans.
Wow.
And that's how I ate for over 2 decades. And then eventually I realized that that's its own extreme. If you go from one extreme to the next extreme, you can kind of experience some things. And so now I'm trying to live more in the middle, which is proving to be very, very difficult. We can talk about that. But along the lines of this raw food journey, my parents decided to hike from Mexico to Canada on the Pacific Crest Trail.
Wow.
And that was my introduction to wild plants because we had no idea what we were doing. We had no business hiking. We'd never been, we had been on one overnight backpacking trip up until that point, and it was an epic failure. And so after that, my mom told my father, we're going to go hike from Mexico to Canada. And my grown man father started crying and said, please don't. Anyway, when you're hiking for that long, you can't carry all the food on your back. So traditionally how hikers do it is they send themselves packages or they have a friend send food parcels their way. And so again, because we were novice and didn't know what we were doing, we started running into food shortages. Pretty severe, actually. And as fun as it is to fast, it's even less fun to fast when you're exerting yourself physically every day. And so we started running out of food like in 4 days, and we had 3 more days to hike or 2 more days to hike on an empty stomach. And at that point, we had to make a decision whether we were going to improvise or quit the trail. And our improvisation was foraging. We picked up a foraging book and started scouring the forest as we hiked for food. And it ended up working really well. We ended up learning a lot over that 6 months. And by the end of the trail, we were living up to 70% of our diet consisted of foraged foods.
Wow.
And, from 13 on, I'm 38 now. From 13 on, I just kept doing it. And I basically combined 2 of my favorite things, which is hiking and eating. And that's my foraging in a nutshell.
Hey, I'm 38 years old too. Like I said, we got some things in common. I too also went down the rabbit trail of trying lots of different dietary philosophies and whatnot. So I went to raw vegan. I I wasn't nearly as long as you were though, maybe a couple years, and then I even tried fruitarianism out.
Yeah, we did that.
And then
Did you try breatharianism?
oh, I definitely like romanticized it,
Yeah.
I definitely didn't. I was fasting quite a bit,
Mhm.
and meditating a lot and that kind of thing. And then I want to say I broke my fast and my raw veganism with bar food chicken wings. So probably not the best way to get back into like the middle path, I guess. But
Yeah. I broke my veganism at a 4th of July barbecue with pork, lamb, and beef. And
that's not
people
too
told me I was
shabby.
going to die. And
Yeah.
instead, I got a burst of energy that I hadn't felt in so long. And I felt like Wolverine. I was like, ah. And at that point on, I was like, okay, I'm going to phase meat back into my diet.
Well, I do want to go talk to you a little bit about YouTube later on, but I did
Mm-hmm.
see in one of your recent videos, you posted about like, say, a wild food bacon soup that you made, and you lost like 11 subscribers because, yeah, you were
Yep.
on that train for a long time. So it sounds like you were self-taught, family taught. Did you have any sort of, say, like instructors or mentors when it comes to wild foods?
Absolutely. Over the years, I've had many dozens.
Yeah.
Everybody from just like random hippie dudes that I've met on the trail to John Kalis up in Portland.
Oh yeah.
Great friend of mine. Karen Sherwood from Earthwalk Northwest. She was one of Tom Brown's. She says she was one of Tom Brown's best students, and I have no reason to doubt her. Yeah, I have no pride when it comes to learning. I love to learn, and so people just come to my life, and I take courses, and I'm perpetually curious, and so I just for the last 25 years, I've been learning it any way that I can, and now YouTube is a great resource. Foraging YouTube is awesome. There's a lot of great people out there like Feral Foraging, a few other people, but their
Boutenko
channels,
Films.
Boutenko Films, yeah.
John Kalis is awesome. I've met him a couple times at various events over the years, and I will be sure to leave a link to his website in the show notes because he just hosts so many amazing wild foods classes, not just plants, but also I want to say teaches you how to dig clams and stuff like that too.
Mm-hmm.
So
And Samuel Thayer, the God,
right.
him and I are pen pals and colleagues. And at first, he wasn't sure what to do with me. A lot of foragers don't know what to do with me because I'm like this dude that wears flip flops, and I don't have wicker baskets, and I don't wear the right kind of sunglasses. And I talk about smoothies a lot. But in his latest book, he sent me a copy signed, and he said, "Hey, check it out. Here's some references. And by the way, you taught me that blending wild greens and smoothies is actually a good idea." So
that's awesome.
That was like a dream come true.
I know you know this, but he's in my neck of the woods now. So, and I know he hosts an annual event, which I'm definitely going to have to make it to here soon. Sam Thayer, yeah, what a great guy to learn from as well. So why don't we discuss a little bit, maybe like the pros and cons of wild foods? Why wild harvest foods?
Well, in my research, actually, I was flying to Australia one time to lead foraging tours, and I had 18 hours to kill on the plane. And I said, maybe this time I'm not going to watch 11 movies in a row and have bloodshot eyes. Maybe I'll just be productive. And so I started coming up with different benefits as to why foraging was good. And I came up with a list of like 50 or so. And then I boiled them down, kind of like, well, these two kind of fit into this one. And I boiled it down. And there's basically 8 or 9 benefits that I see. Number one, they're nutritionally superior. So wild plants, weeds especially, they have really long root systems. Those root systems are able to go below depleted topsoil and draw out vital minerals and vitamins. And now that I have acreage of my own, I've actually been testing this, and I have videos about it. So for example, common mallow, which is a wild okra relative, I have a video where I grew okra right next to mallow, and then we actually look at the root system of okra, which is about this long, and then mallow is like 6 to 10 feet long. And in fact, when you pull on those roots, sometimes you throw out your back doing it. So they're nutritionally superior. Benefit number 2 is they're free food. We all know that food costs are rising. My wife just went to Costco. She spent $400, and it was like less than half a shopping cart full of food.
Wow.
I kind of bitched about it on YouTube. People can watch that if they want.
Sure.
And so if you do this actively and regularly, you can offset a lot of food costs, thousands of dollars a year. And some people say, well, you're lucky because you have land. I've spent the bulk of my life not having land, foraging from public lands, public parks. And so you can do it too. Benefit number 3 is it prepares you for unfortunate events. I don't really consider myself a prepper, but I do like to be self-sustainable to the best of my abilities. And so just like on the trail where we started running out of food and then figured out how we can get food, foraging offers that for the average man or woman or child. It also builds community when you forage with people you love, with your kids, with your wife. Some of the best dates I've ever gone on with my wife. We go and forage for mushrooms. We laugh, we joke, we talk a little crap, all all in good fun. And then we bring the mushrooms home, we cook dinner, and it's just like a start to finish beautiful day. Plus you spend time in nature, which is another benefit. That's benefit number 4. You walk outside and without even picking a plant, you get sunlight, vitamin D, you breathe fresh air. That's really good for you. And just by being in nature, that naturally lowers your heart rate. There's lots of great research out there about that. When people just immerse themselves into nature, and not even that, they can just look outside a window, their heart rate naturally drops and they start healing faster. And so that's benefit number 4. I have in my Wild Edibles book, I've outlined it, and sometimes I get frazzled and forget all 8, but there's lots of benefits.
Yeah. So just speaking about your book, we did want to talk a little bit about that for sure. So that's Wild Edibles, a practical guide to foraging with easy identification of 60 edible plants and 67 recipes. So you were telling me that your publisher now has it on audio. Is there anything you wanted to say about that process? Were you the voice of the audiobook?
Yes. So we're recording this on September 11th. Tomorrow on September 12th, 2023, the audiobook version of my book comes out.
Oh, nice.
And originally my publisher was like, we'll hire a pro to narrate it. And I go, well, I mean, Joe Rogan always says you should narrate your own books. That's number 1. But number 2, I've been on YouTube since 2007 and millions of people heard me speak. And I think it would be kind of weird if somebody else narrated my book.
Yeah.
And so I really pushed to narrate it myself. This was very fun and challenging because I'm not a good out loud reader. And so I just started reading out loud, and in 3 months I became pretty good. And then I recorded the book in my hometown of Ashland. There's a professional recording studio there. And I have to say, I listened to a lot of audiobooks. Last year I read 55. This year I'm set to kind of break that record. And some part of me feels like I'm cheating when I read an audiobook. Like everybody knows if you read a book versus listen to it, it's a little bit better. But recording my own book, I changed my mind. Because all of the words that I wrote in the book took me 2 years to write the book. I'd never said those words out loud. And when I read my own words out loud, it was magic for me because, like I said, I just never heard those words before. I'd said some of them in lectures and stuff, but I've never read it cover to cover out loud. And so that made me realize that what you get when you listen to an audiobook written by the author is the passion and the heart of that author. So, maybe it's not as pure as reading the book, but you get something that you otherwise don't when you read a book.
I'm a big advocate of audiobooks too, podcasts as well, obviously. I actually some of the earliest episodes of the Herb Rally podcast were me narrating plant monographs, and it is definitely a skill that you start to get better and better at. But boy, is it frustrating in the beginning.
Yeah, they put me in an isolation booth, and I had 1 or 2 engineers just like stopping and being like, do it again.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But eventually we became good friends, and then it just started rolling and we found a system worked great.
Are there any, say like ad libs or you go off from script during the process at all?
Yes, sir. Because, it's a funny thing because I wrote my book in 2013, so 10 years ago. And a lot has changed since then. Some of the research has changed. Some of the video content has changed. 10 years ago, I'd only been to 30 countries. Presently, I've been to 66 countries.
Wow.
And so I feel like, some of that stuff is really important to kind of update, because one thing I've noticed as I've traveled the world is when you're talking about common weeds, like things that like dandelions, common mallow, plantain, those things grow literally everywhere that I go. So one other benefit of wild edibles, actually, that John Callis and Karen Sherwood both talk about, is that when you learn X amount of plants, you have friends everywhere you go. And so, I go to the Alps and I find dandelions there. I go to Jamaica and I find dandelions there. I go to Russia and I find dandelions there. And it kind of helps me realize that the earth isn't really that big. And it also helps me feel like I should do my part more and conserve it more, because everything's connected.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Do you have any sort of like a botany background, or is it just you develop these relationships with these plants so much that you just recognize them everywhere you go?
No botany background at all. In fact, on page 1 or 2, I say I'm not a botanist.
Okay.
I'm not an expert. I've just, the thing is that botany is great, but I realized early on that a lot of botanists almost get separated from nature.
Yes.
And this is, of course, not true of everybody. There's lots of great botanists out there, but a lot of people, they lean into their school so hard that they actually feel like, oh, look how important I am. I've educated myself to the nth degree, and you need 15 years of school to get to where I get. And it's really not that complicated. Anybody can do it. In fact, our grandparents did just that. If you go back just a few generations, my Russian grandparents foraged all the time. And I have lots of friends in America whose grandparents and great-grandparents foraged all the time too. It's just that eventually, foraging's hard. It takes effort. In many of my videos, I'm sweating profusely, and you can't really avoid that.
Right.
And so I think we just kind of traded it for the comfort of going to a grocery store.
Yeah.
And once we stop practicing, it seems like this foreign thing that's really difficult. But I really believe that we have 5 basic senses. Those are our tools to keep us safe. And as such, if you just use a little bit of common sense as well as your tools, then anybody can do it, especially kids. In my work, I've worked with lots of kid groups of various ages, and I've realized that they can listen and forage much better than most adults.
I love that. Speaking of, being on a high horse, you were talking about the frugality of wild harvesting. We actually have a free course here at Herb Rally called The Art of Frugal Nutrition. So I'm all about saving money and still eating nutritious foods. There's like this misconception that eating healthy has to be expensive. I'm just kind of curious, besides wild harvesting, do you have any other tips for saving money when grocery shopping? Any other thoughts come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So Karen Sherwood, one of the things she taught me was, well, let me start with a little story first. Sure. I went to one of her workshops 10 years ago, and my job was to pick clover for a salad. A lot of these wild edible workshops are really good hands-on workshops. You get a little bit of in-class time, and then you go out, you harvest for plants, and then you make a meal, and then you go out and you harvest for plants and you make a meal. That's actually another benefit. You realize how hard it is to harvest plants. It makes you sweat, it makes you work. We already talked about that, but at the end of every day, you're sore and you're tired. So it offers exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And so my task was to harvest clover for a salad on that particular day, and I failed. I came back and I said to Karen, I didn't see any clover. Give me some other task. And she said, take this bowl, take these scissors, go back to the field, get on your hands and knees, slow down, and notice. Just kind of see. Boy, was I humbled, because it turns out that I was unable to find clover in a clover field. I went back, I got on my hands and knees, and it was like a farm. It was farmland that had been clover was planted there so that it would put nitrogen back in the soil. So that was a rough one.
Wow.
Karen, if you're listening, thank you again for that. I still remember that lesson.
That's awesome.
And so what happens is when you start to learn a plant, when you start to slow down and study something, she always says, if you take the time to study a plant, you'll know it for life. That's also true with domestic plants. And so your tip is, how do you save money? Of course, organic and biodynamic food is the best. I guess we could argue that because the more companies that get into the game, the more the standards drop, and maybe it's not the best. But
good point.
Let's pretend we live in an imaginary world where it is the gold standard. The second best is ripe. A lot of food is picked unripe, like oranges are picked 6 months before they're ripe, and then they're put in a room and they're gassed so that they turn orange, so that they look orange, so that we buy them. And so if you can't buy organic food, if you're financially unable to, the next best thing to do is to go and try and find ripe food. And the way that you do that is you just go to the grocery store and you do the same thing you do as you're foraging. So you look at an orange and you study it, and you notice if it's really hard, you take it home, it's kind of sour. The next time you go to the store, you pick an orange and it's slightly more squishy. You bring it home, it's much sweeter. And so you can save money by just using your eyes and your senses at the store, and not necessarily going for the organic food, but going for the ripe, beautiful, delicious food. And also farm stands. A lot of farmers are dirt poor because they can't sell their food to grocery stores, but they can sell it to you direct. They make more money, you save money, everybody's happy.
Those are great tips. I've thought about this question a lot, and I've never considered the ripeness. That's pretty brilliant, actually. I like that tip.
That's I've read about that, where our eyes, why does like a cherry turn red when it wants you to eat it? Yeah. It's because it creates a crazy contrast that our eyes pick up. And it's the reproductive cycle of a cherry. The cherry wants you to eat it so that occasionally you swallow some pits. Yeah. And then you poop the pits out in a nice pile of fertilizer, and it grows a cherry tree. Unfortunately, cherries don't know that we have plumbing and toilets, but in an ideal scenario, when you're climbing around and the cherries aren't ripe, you don't see them, you don't eat them. Then when they're ripe and ready to be eaten, they turn a different color.
Awesome. All right. Well, good tips. Thanks for sharing. I do want to talk a little bit about your YouTube channel. You have over 600 videos. You've been at this for, I want to say 12 or 13 years, something like that. Almost at 200,000 subscribers. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, of course. And as you say, in one of your recent videos doesn't really mean anything, but of course it kind of does. I mean, it shows all the work you've put into it. But you recently started a new show. I want to say it's called Wild Edibles Test Kitchen.
You're right. Yeah.
Right? Awesome. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the new show, and also maybe kind of throw in like one of your new recipes, say like the dandelion pesto.
Yeah. So I started it basically. I've been thinking about this a lot. A lot of people, myself included, we talk about foraging kind of in a theoretical sense, where like you could do this or you should do this, but then we don't actually do it, or we don't do it enough. And so I thought, what if I started a show where the premise was you take and you harvest one plant, one wild edible plant, or one edible weed, and then you turn it into something delicious, or cram it into something you're already doing, to kind of show other people that, yes, this is possible. Yes, you can make it tasty. Feed my wife when she comes home from her real job, and then also walk my own talk. And so that's the premise of the show. I go out and I harvest a plant, turn it into something crazy. It's different every time. And so far it's been going really well, but it's a slow journey because I'm a one-man band. I do everything myself. Sure. It takes me between 30 and 40 hours to make an episode. And wow. So it's just kind of slow going, but 8 episodes are live. I have, like you mentioned, one is called the dandelion pesto. Dandelions by their nature are very bitter, as you know. And that bitterness is really good for cleaning inner organs, pancreas, liver, kidneys. But we've been taught not to like bitter flavors anymore. And so how do you eat the bitter in an enjoyable fashion? Well, it turns out there's a trick for that. And that trick is to blend it with fat. Parmesan cheese, olive oil, butter, you name it, avocado. And so I take walnuts because pine nuts are like $370 a pound these days. I take walnuts because they're a little cheaper.
Sure.
And I blend it with some garlic and some dandelions that I harvest from my front and backyard. And I blend it together. And, it's a no bullshit show. If it's bitter, I show you that it's bitter. But it significantly cuts the bitterness. It freezes well. You can make a batch, huge batch of it when dandelions are ripe. Stick them in your freezer. And then for the rest of the year, you can save money by eating pesto.
I love
Check
that.
it out. It's on YouTube. Wild Edibles Test Kitchen.
We'll link to that. And is there an associated playlist too, so someone could watch them all in order and whatnot?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, we use walnuts for pesto too, due to the same reason. And I actually enjoy it a lot. I like the flavor of walnuts quite a bit. Have you ever had the opportunity to harvest pine nuts? That's something I've never harvested before.
I have, yeah. So down in Southwest, I've been in Santa Fe and stuff where they have pinyon pines.
Oh yeah.
And I can see why they're expensive. They're tiny little nuts. They have a shell, cracking those shells, especially by hand. I'm sure they have machines that do it, but when I was doing it, I didn't have said machines. And so it really makes you think. It's like, yeah, I get it. Pine nuts are expensive. But also another thing is that squirrels and birds are much better at harvesting those nuts. And so you have to compete against them. And so I think I worked for 5 or 6 hours and I had maybe a quart of pine nuts. So
hence the price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same thing with quinoa. When, I talk about wild edibles a lot. I talk about foraging a lot and survival. And some people get the impression that I don't like anything about the modern world, which is completely not my intention. I love going to the grocery store. I think it's amazing that you can go to the store and buy a pound of quinoa for $6. Because to grow a pound of quinoa and then actually take the sheaths off, and that's going to take you a month. I've done it, and it's going to be full of like all kinds of sticks and dried debris. And so, I'm a realist in life. And so I like to forage as much as I can, get my nutrition from greens and berries and mushrooms, and then buy the things that are really hard to grow.
I'm guessing you've considered this before, but maybe another perk of, say, growing your own food or wild harvesting is actually the gratitude that you give the farmers who are doing all of this insanely hard work. Because I used to work for a company called Mountain Rose Herbs. They sell organic herb spices and teas dried in the dried form. And, people would be astonished that you would sell, say, chamomile flowers for, say, I don't even remember what the price was, say $20 a pound. But you could imagine what the work that it would take to get, say, a pound of chamomile flowers would be.
You're exactly spot on. And I have thought of that, but I always love getting reminded.
Yeah.
One of my best friends here in Oregon are the Fries. They have the biggest farm in Southern Oregon, biggest organic farm called Fry Family Farms. I've known their family for years. And now Susie and Steve are in their 70s. And we actually get milk over there now. And
Nice.
So the other day I ran into her and I said, Susie, because she's always doing something, right? She's always working with her hands. And she goes, I'm 73. I'm starting to slow down. And I go, let me ask you this. How much do you work per day? Like, when did you wake up today and when are you going to stop working? She's like, well, I woke up at 5:30. I was working by 5:45. I saw her at 3 p.m. She's like, I'll probably work till like 6 or 7. I'm like, so you're pulling like 11, 12-hour days? She's like, yep. So to your point,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Farmers are some of the hardest working people I've ever interacted with. They just work. They're like human tractors.
True. Also located in Southern Oregon is actually the Herbalist Hour's first sponsor. It's Oshala Farm.
Yeah, they're just in the Applegate down the road.
That's right. Amazing people, Elise and Jeff Higley. So thanks for the support to Oshala Farm. Really appreciate it. I do have on Sergei, so I really got to talk about smoothies. I'm curious, do you still do the smoothie thing? If so, do you have any like tips or tricks? Or let's say this, do you have any inspiration for me to get back into making smoothies if you are still doing that?
Absolutely. I'm still doing smoothies.
Awesome.
I like to say that I've been on a green smoothie challenge for 20 years. My mom
awesome.
pioneered the concept of green smoothies, and it trended for a while to the point where Iron Man was drinking them and stuff. And
really?
Robert Downey Jr. I don't know if he ever gave my mom credit, but that doesn't matter. He was drinking smoothies, and Iron Man in the movie was drinking a smoothie. Wow. And then just like any other trend, it kind of moved on to like whatever it is currently, whether that's carnivore or whatever.
Sure.
I think there was a lot of hit pieces written on smoothies saying that if you do too many, it's going to cause kidney stones. And I think it's unfair criticism because you only get kidney stones if you don't rotate your greens. So what we noticed happening, and we try to combat it as best as we could, but it still happens, is people find a recipe that they like, spinach, kale, or let's say spinach, banana, mango.
Yeah.
And then for 2 years straight, that's all they do. Spinach, banana, mango, spinach, banana, mango.
Yeah.
And then there comes a point where you cannot look at spinach or bananas or mangoes anymore, because that's the body's natural response to say, that's enough. We're not meant to eat mono diets. In fact, if we live seasonally, if we foraged, we would constantly be changing our diet. We would eat kale when it was in season, and then winter would happen, and then we'd go on to eat acorns or deer or whatever else. Or if we were vegan, we would probably hike 2,000 miles south to better weather.
Right.
And so same thing goes with smoothies. If you're going to drink smoothies, I think there's immense benefit. There's solid research that nobody's ever refuted that they're good for you. It's just really important to remember that you have to rotate the ingredients that go in. And so I have a couple green smoothie challenges out there on YouTube. One is called the 30-Day Green Smoothie Challenge. And then a lot of people complained, well, I would love to do that, but I'm busy. So I made another challenge called the 30-Day Green Smoothie Challenge for busy people, where we batch the smoothies.
No more excuses.
No more excuses. There's no excuses here. For myself too, because I'm
Sure.
busy. I have like 17 different things going on at any one point. And the way that you rotate your greens could be any which way. You don't have to do it every day. You don't even have to do it every month. Just go to the store, buy whatever's on sale, make smoothies out of that, or go foraging, blend whatever's in season. And then naturally, the next time you go to the store, or the next time you go to your front lawn, something else will be ripe. I have a field now. I have 3 acres here in Medford. And I just sit and drink my coffee and I watch the field. And an amazing thing that I've noticed is that first it's plantain, then it's wild lettuce, then it's wild chamomile, then it's dandelion. And so it's constantly rotating and I don't even do anything. Right. And so if I'm blending smoothies from my backyard, in 4 months, I just rotated my smoothies 4 different times.
Cool.
And then maybe my only other tip is don't be too perfect. I'm a perfectionist. I always want to make the perfect smoothie. I always want to load it with as many greens as possible because everybody says, and including myself, the greens are good for you. And so then you make these Swamp Thing green smoothies that you never want to drink because they taste disgusting. Yeah. And if you don't drink them, you don't benefit from them. So don't be afraid of fruit, especially when the fiber's intact. Make them taste good.
Great advice. Yeah, I'm going to have to watch those inspirational videos afterwards and do a 30-day challenge myself. Are you familiar with nourishing herbal infusions? They're basically strong teas of mineral-rich plants. Yeah. So I really want to create a video, some sort of 30-day challenge for like nourishing herbal infusions, kind of a similar concept where you're just getting this influx of, say, vitamins and minerals and whatnot.
That's a great idea. I'd love to see that video.
All right. I'll hook you up when I'm done with it.
Do it. I've thought about doing a 30-day green smoothie challenge with wild edibles, and it'll be called something like the 30-day green smoothie challenge for people that don't have a life, because it's literally going to take you an entire month to just forage for it.
I love you. I love it. It might not be super popular.
I love you too.
But I love you too. Little Freudian slip there. No. So we talked smoothies. I also, I know you're into kettlebells and whatnot.
That a boy. I've seen that. Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious what your current workout regimen is like. Are you still doing kettlebells and whatnot?
Absolutely. So 2 years ago, I bought a bird dog, and we've been hunting a little bit more. And she's a tornado mixed with a hurricane with a little pepper of tsunami. If I don't exercise her, I don't get anything done.
Sure.
And so for the last 2 years, every single morning, except for maybe like 5 mornings, no joke, we go to the local park and hike between 3 and 7 miles. So I figure I've done about 3,000 miles with her, and I just put a 40 pound weight vest on every time I do it, just because why not? Yeah. And so those are my mornings. And then most days I get in the gym. The very first thing we did when we remodeled our house was make a gym, because at the time I was living with my in-laws and I was like, I just need this for mental health.
Right.
And in the gym is a full squat rack. I have like 28 kettlebells in there. I got IKFF certified a couple of years ago, so I can teach kettlebells now. Oh, and it's just a great modality. I'm not dogmatic about it. in your toolbox, you have lots of different tools. You have hammers, you have saws, but kettlebells are a great way to improve your mobility, to get flexible while also building strength. And it's kind of like 30-day green smoothie challenge for busy people. It's a great way to get your heart rate up, build some strength in not that much time. So plus I'm Russian and I feel like contractually I'm obligated to like kettlebells.
So kettlebells are from Russia then, yeah?
Yeah, they were imported. So nobody really knows. Some people claim to know, but in the reading that I've done, nobody really knows how the whole kettlebell thing started. As best as people can discern, they were like merchants and farmers. They had big kettlebell like weights that they would weigh their wheat and vegetables with. And then the farmers got bored in between like vending at the farmers market, so they started just like throwing them and just doing tricks and seeing who can do the most swings, and that eventually turned into kettlebells. And then Russian Olympic lifters started using them because their weird handles and their shape makes them you can essentially you can practice Olympic lifting while having a lot lower weight, so you're not as liable to get hurt while you're training.
Are you a big fan of, say, body weight exercises in general? Do you do any other sort of, say, like pull-ups, push-ups, that kind of thing?
If you ask my wife, she would say yes. So basically, I'm a fanatic. I hang pull-up bars everywhere I go. I
That's
have
awesome.
like rings. Yeah. I have rock rings. I have pull-up bars. In my bathroom, like on the way to the bathroom, I have a pull-up bar. And so every time I go pee, I'm like 10 pull-ups, 10 pull-ups. Sometimes I pretend like they're not there. I kind of turn my eyes off, but yeah, I try and stay up on that. I think push-ups are great. Body weight squats are awesome. Lunges. In fact, when I used to travel more, when before like all the lockdowns and stuff, I would just do push-ups and squats in the airport, or when I was standing in line.
You're one of those people.
I was one of those people.
I love it.
Shamelessly. And the funny thing is that like at first people judge, and then they start doing it with you.
Of course. Yeah. This guy's normalizing it. So yeah, I want to get on the, yep.
Exactly.
So in my last house, when I was living in Oregon, we actually, this was before my wife moved in, of course, I actually had monkey bars installed in the living room. So I would be doing, monkey bars throughout the living room. And then sometimes I'd do pull-ups and whatnot. And so I was the same way. I would have pull-up bars in the garage. And actually we converted my garage to like a 2-story lofted thing. And so I had a rope climb going up. I missed that actually. Now that I'm talking to you, I'm like, shoot, I need to get some monkey bars back in this house. So
get it. There's a company called Atomic Climbing Holds. They make these banana holds. They're like cool. You can do pull-ups on them, and I have 36 of them from a YouTube review I did years ago. And so I've been threatening that I'm going to do the perimeter of our eaves, just bananas. And my wife is funny. She's tell me if you can relate to this, but sure. I'll tell her something and she's like, whatever, you don't know what you're talking about. But then she'll see some model on Instagram say the exact same thing, and then she'll be like, we should do this. Like horse trough hot tubs. We don't have a bathtub in my house, so I steal hot water and put it in a horse trough. And then it's essentially like a mini hot springs that I make myself.
That's cool.
I sit under the stars, take a hot bath. And so my wife's been giving me so much crap. She's like, that's so ghetto. And then she sees this couple that said 17 years of marriage. And, we've been taking horse trough baths this whole time. She's like, check it out.
Sometimes you just need to hear or see it from someone else. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I can relate for sure. Just on a side note, maybe I'll include a little video of this in the interview. Along with that rope climb, our garage bedroom also had a slide. So we would slide from the top down to the bottom. That's the main thing I miss.
Garage bedroom. Was it like a warehouse type situation?
Yeah, so it was just kind of like a taller garage that previously had they called it a bedroom, but it was more like a glorified closet. And we had my dad help us convert it. And basically, he just cut a big hole in the floor and then turned it into like this lofted situation. The idea was to have, a slide. And then we were actually, before we moved, we were going to install a rock climbing wall also to get up. But then we sold our house before we got around to that. But we still actually have those holds. It's from So Ill Holds. So they're not, that's a nice company, but basically we're trying to turn our bedroom into essentially like a jungle gym, which we were on our way.
So that's another thing we have in common, because
Yeah.
when I met my wife, I was living in a warehouse
Yeah.
and I had a rope up to the loft.
Oh, that's
We
awesome.
were looking for a slide, but those things are surprisingly difficult to come by. We never did find our slide.
Well, yeah, we had ours custom made by my dad, so that was kind of an advantage there for us. But
What
okay,
brought you
so
to Wisconsin? Can I ask you a question?
yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So my wife is from a town called Algoma, Wisconsin, and she moved to Oregon a few years ago, and we met at that company that we that I was telling you about earlier, Mountain Rose Herbs. And so we worked together for 4 years. I fell in love with her immediately, and I'd never told her. And then finally I told her one day, and then, next thing you know, we're getting married and whatnot. I shouldn't have waited for so long. But then it just so happened that we were both ready to leave that job. We wanted to pursue Herb Rally full time, which allowed us to be mobile. And then we wanted to move back to Wisconsin, and we just didn't want to live in the town of Algoma because it's kind of small and whatnot. So we settled on Appleton. So yeah, that's kind of it. My wife's from here, so yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how did you link up with Oshala Farms?
So I've known Oshala Farm for quite some time, Elise and Jeff, because they would sell their herbs to Mountain Rose Herbs. They're very heavily involved in the herbal community. We'd see each other at different herbal events. In fact, I started organizing the Brighton Bush Herbal Conference. And the first person I thought to help co-organize it with me was Elise, because she's like a good friend. She knows the community well. She's super like organized and all that. So yeah, they've just been friends for a long time. And yeah, I visited
Awesome.
their farm several times. I've been to their parties, like their New Year's Eve party and whatnot. So
Next time you come in, we're just like 20 minutes down the road. I
that's
drive by their
awesome.
farm every time I go surfing.
No way. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to link up and yeah, hang out and whatnot. That'd be amazing.
And we used to go to Essene conferences at Brighton Bush when we were raw foodists. So we have that in common
totally.
as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
I could totally see a raw vegan conference being held at the Brighton Bush. And yeah, prayers to Brighton Bush, because they've been devastated by the forest fires and whatnot. And that's essentially why I stopped organizing the conference, was because first COVID happened, and then we pushed that out. And then, next thing you know, there's just these devastating forest fires that took a lot of the land as well as some of the buildings and whatnot. So
yeah, devastating. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I have not been back since.
In Oregon, the summers have been rough for the last 10 plus years, and it's kind of hard to plan for the smoke. It could be totally clear August through, or like July through September, or it could just be like the last month here has been AQI 300 to 500. And
oh my gosh.
Like smoking 10 packs of cigarettes, you get bags under your eyes and just start looking like a 57-year-old person at 38. It's not good.
I do not miss that. And it's, I feel so bad when I hear about these, a lot of my friends and family still live in Oregon having to deal with all that. I was going to ask you, so you live on land now, but it looks to me as if you were part of, like, say, the van life culture. Are you still, and I saw that you're selling your van on your YouTube channel. Are you still doing some of that van life stuff, or?
Yeah. So my channel on YouTube has always been kind of a variety channel, because I'm a very curious person, and I just like things grab me. And I feel that one of the perks of being self-employed is you can just follow those leads, see, it's kind of adventurous to see where you end up. And having a van has been amazing. I got a van in 2013 because I was touring around and doing book tours and foraging tours. And I would buy these hotels for the night that I never even really set foot in. I would throw my bones on the bed at midnight after all the lecturing was done. And by 5:30, I was out of there. And so I figured, what if I had a van? I could save $20,000-$30,000 a year on lodging, probably stay closer to the event location, and then sleep in my own sheets and my own smells. And so I did that, saved a bunch of money, realized that vans are awesome. My wife, then my girlfriend, when we first met, she was like, well, who's this dude with this weird vehicle? But then she quickly was like, I never have to set up a tent again. This is awesome. I get Tempur-Pedic mattress plus fresh air. And so, yeah, I'm still part of the van life thing. We're selling the van kind of out of necessity, not because we want to, because we have our first child on the way.
Yeah.
And we want a baby more than we want a van. And so we're going to just pay off some debts.
There you go.
And, but yeah, van life is great. I don't think, just to be clear, I don't think living in a van is great. There's a lot of that going on. And I think that's just like people telling themselves, I'm doing better than I am. Yeah. And if you're curious about what I'm talking about, you can go watch my movie Van Boom that I made in 2018. where I interviewed something like 70 van people about why they live in vans. And the people that live in vans full time, that have the luxury of like working and, moving on, they usually last about 6 months before they give it up.
Yeah.
And then the people that live in vans for much longer, largely speaking, this is going to be very probably inflammatory in general, but a lot of people that live in vans for years do so because they kind of have to. And this is coming also from somebody that lived in a van for 3 years. In the early 2000s, we traveled around, late 90s, early 2000s. We lived on and off in an Astro van, family of 5, because we were homeless and just traveling around. And I think having the house and the van is the ideal combo. You go out, you save $500 on hotels because everything's expensive these days.
Yeah.
Live in your own smells, come back, enjoy your house, enjoy your community, go out on an adventure again.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know you had a documentary about that. And you're actually kind of, I don't want to say exposing, you're shedding light on the actual, enjoyment, because it does seem glorified, say on Instagram. I'll say this, we actually just, before we made the move, we had this compromise where we got an RV, and we were going to live in it half time.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried that once, and we did not enjoy it. I really thought I was going to love it. And so we actually just finished selling our RV. So we're just totally done with it. And I'm so excited that we don't have that kind of looming over us anymore. And again, maybe this is coming from a place of privilege to even have that opportunity in the first place. But I will say this, I'm very glad that we tried it. And it was the catalyst that got us from Oregon to Wisconsin. So I'm very thankful for it. But in the end, it was a very expensive mistake, if you will.
So let me ask you this, because I'm curious. Yeah. Why didn't you love it?
Well, we just moved cross country to this new house. Well, it's built in 1904. It's new to us, in this wonderful neighborhood in Appleton. We painted the whole thing because there was cigarette smoke everywhere, and we put all this work into it. And then right when we were done, we essentially lived there for like 2 months, and then we moved into the RV. And the whole time in the RV, living in this cramped space with like 3 cats, and it raining every single day when we were in Oregon from January to April, I'm just visualizing this beautiful house that we just got in Appleton, Wisconsin, just thinking, oh man, even though it's 900 square feet, it would feel so much bigger. And my wife and I both like to have certain ambiances when we're doing our work. We could never feel comfortable in there. I would have to go to a coffee shop almost every day to accomplish any sort of work, you know what I mean? So because I don't know, I just didn't feel super creative or energized when I was in that space. That was like, I would say, the main thing. But yeah, there's other things too. Just we never really made it our own. I suspect we would have got better at it over time. But all in all, it was just me thinking of this new house, new neighborhood, new town that I love while I'm sitting here in a 30-foot RV while it's raining every single day.
Yeah, that came up a lot. I think the grass is always greener. And even though people constantly tell us, don't believe everything you hear on Instagram, I still believe it, or I still want to believe it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people make van life look like something that it's not. And when they do it, they start missing community. They start missing routine.
Yeah.
And they ultimately trade one set of problems for another set of problems. Maybe you have a smaller mortgage payment, but now you have to find water every 2 days. Now you have to, figure out how to do maintenance. Like one at the local Mercedes dealer here, one thing they told me recently is like van people need to do repairs, but they never plan where they're going to stay while their van is in the shop for 2 weeks. And now that everything's backed up, those 2 weeks can turn into 2 months. Who can afford to just rent a house for 2 months on a whim?
Right. Yeah.
But on the other side is like, to have it as I always kind of think like the house is like your mothership and the van is like the rocket. To be able to jam to the coast, go surfing, save $300, $400 on hotels, have a great adventure, come back. You can't really beat that.
Yeah, that's the best of both worlds. It really is. I also wanted to say, like, I fancy myself kind of like an organized person. I never felt like I really had spots for everything. You know what I mean? And the whole male situation too was a pain in the ass as well. So I'm sure you cover a lot of that in your documentary. How can one watch that documentary?
It's on YouTube. Van
Oh,
Boom.
it is.
Yeah.
Van Boom.
Like
Okay.
Van Boom. Van Boom.
Awesome. I'll be sure to link to that as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's shift gears yet again. I'm curious if you remember writing this blog post. I want to say it's back in 2019, so tell me if not. But basically, you said you have this healthy self-esteem recipe, and I was hoping you could expound upon it. And I'll just read you the steps here. Step 1, examine yourself honestly. Step 2, decide to make a beneficial change. Step 3, get to work making said changes. And step 4, stay consistent and don't cheat. First of all, do you recall what I'm talking about? And second of all, if so, would you be willing to expound upon that?
Absolutely. Yes. I believe that was post my documentary, I Want Abs. So I used to make one documentary a year, and one of them was called I Want Abs because that's exactly what I wanted. And I thought, you see all these Instagram models or YouTubers that have like a raging six pack that they can do their laundry on. And I thought, is that attainable for the average guy? And can you do it in such a way that it doesn't consume your entire life? And so I grabbed my camera, made myself accountable by raising a bunch of money for the documentary, and then like having to do it. And I learned that if you just exercise 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, let's say, maybe 6, I did 6, but I ended up enjoying it, and that's why. And then you just eat right. A lot of abs get made in the kitchen. Then you can, make relatively small shifts that improve your entire life. And that project taught me that consistency is everything. If you just sit around wishing and do nothing, you're going to be miserable. And when I learned that in 2016, 2019, when I made the blog post, I was like, I'm never going back to this. Fast forward a few years to COVID, and I went back to it, and I've never been more miserable because I completely didn't do all of the things I knew that I should.
Yeah.
It's really simple. You just have to keep at it. The hardship when people talk about the journey, it's all about the journey. It's not about the reward. The journey is the reward. I realized that when you're working on fitness or health, it's the day-to-day, it's the mundane that is the life. And when you don't do it, what's your reward? Anxiety and depression. And I have a new outlook on those things too, because anxiety is your internal mechanism for you to change something. I noticed there, during the last couple of years, there were times where I just was really down in the pits. I had a bunch of family drama happen, and, obviously we were all living through a pandemic together, and I've felt anxiety like never before. And then at one point I was holding my breath in my horse trough bathtub, and I realized that when I got to like a minute, the anxiety set in. And then I just realized that those two anxieties that you feel are the same anxiety. And so then I just started thinking, like, why is that? And it was clear when you're holding your breath in the water tank, the anxiety is like, change something or die.
Right.
Get out of the water and breathe again.
Yeah.
And so when I feel anxiety in life, now I pretend like I'm just holding my breath and I need to change something. And since I've started changing those things and being consistent, wouldn't you know it, I'm much happier. Everything's a lot better. I picked up a kettlebell again, started swinging it, started walking with my dog, started making my smoothies again. That is the reward. It's not like I had this misconception that I could just exercise for 6 months and then I'd be done.
Right. Right.
Don't be, and then I had to tell myself, don't be a bitch. This is your new life.
It's a practice.
Yeah. Same with foraging. It's like, after winter, every year, I'm like, do I even remember how to do this? You have to be consistent. If you don't use it, you lose it. Right. And then luckily you get back into the swing of things and it comes back. But that's just life. You can't, that's like a natural law that you can't get around.
So many good reminders in there. So you used the breathing again outside of the hot tub as an analogy. And I'm curious, when you say just have this base level anxiety, and nowadays, are you able to kind of pinpoint what that stress actually is so you're able to make that change, or is it kind of foggy at first? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Yeah. So, it depends on the anxiety and how long you've had it. Yeah. I think that's how I would answer that question. So like for example, one of the things I'm doing now is I'm pivoting massively, and I'm completely going to change everything because I realized that I can't keep up with trying to make a living on YouTube, because the lie that I was told by the tech industry is the more subscribers you get, the better things will be, the more doors that get opened to you. Just keep working hard. 615 videos later, I'm making less money than I ever have on YouTube.
Wow.
I have almost 200,000 subscribers. And when I launch a video, 600 people get it delivered.
Right.
Whereas when I had 10,000 subscribers, 50,000 people or 1,000,000 people would see it. And so that is actually working against me, because now the doors are shutting. People say, well, we were going to sponsor you, but we went back and looked at all your videos from the last year and they don't have enough views. So no, thank you.
Right.
And so that was giving me a lot of anxiety. And to unpack that took a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And so how I unpacked it is I decided to go back to the real world. And so I'm going to EMT school to become a city firefighter.
Oh, wow.
And so then I'm going to do that and then do my wild edible show on the side, because firefighting has a flexible schedule for it. And so, you know, that living through that anxiety was really tough, and I was in a fog, and that's part of the anxiety. Like, what do I change? You feel like a bird in a cage smashing against each wall. Yeah. But the holding my breath was really the eye-opening experience, because I was like, holy crap, this is the exact same way I feel. So I just need to change something. What do I need to change? And so then when you know that you need to change something and you start looking for it, generally ask and you shall receive, right? Life will show you. And sometimes with easy things that you'll know right away. And sometimes with hard things, it might take 6 months or a year. But I think I'm coming around to the fact that anxiety is really it's like a sense that keeps you safe.
I love that. I've never heard it put that way before.
I never have either.
Yeah.
So maybe somebody said it before me.
Sure.
I don't think I'm that original, but it was kind of an interesting thing. Like, I was listening to somebody recently, and I forget who it was, but it was Stephen King. One of my favorite books is called On Writing by Stephen King. And he says one of the brilliant things about how he writes is he just takes two things that seemingly don't have connections and he puts them together. And that was kind of my Stephen King moment, where I was having anxiety in life and sitting in a tank holding my breath. And I was like, oh my God, these two things are the same.
Brilliant. I've heard of On Writing. I've never read it or listened to it. I know it's on audio as well, but tell me if this is from that book, because I use this one sometimes. I only write when I'm inspired, and I'm inspired every morning at 8 a.m. Is that from that book? Do you remember?
I don't remember. But that sounds, he talks a lot about, there's another guy called Stephen something or other who wrote a book called The Art of War, The War of Art.
Oh yeah, I've read that one.
Stephen Pressfield.
That's right.
And so they kind of have something in common, I believe, where they just treat the craft like a muse, like you just have to show up.
Yeah.
And so Stephen King talks about how when you're writing your first draft, you always go into your office, like stare at a wall, don't have a window, close the door, don't let anybody in. And then only on your second draft do you invite people in for feedback. And so I think that kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of in line with what you're saying, maybe not in those exact words, but you kind of just have to do it. You have to show up. And another thing I really learned from him is that people say, well, how the hell are you so prolific? Like, you've written whatever, dozens of books, 50, 80 books. How do you do it? And he's like, people don't realize I actually like doing it.
Yeah.
That's how I do it.
Yeah.
And that's how I've made 600 videos. When inspiration grabs me, it's not a question of how do I do it. It's like, I can't not do it.
Yeah. I'm relatively new in the YouTube journey. We're about 2 years in, and it's funny. My wife probably gets really annoyed at me because every time something comes up, I'm like, oh, that should be a YouTube video. We should make that into a YouTube video.
That'll never go away, man. I have lists. I have running lists everywhere in my phone. I have some on the wall, and I'm just like, oh, that would make a good video. That would make a good video. And one of the reasons I pivoted to the show, there was a couple reasons. Number one, I wanted to get better at foraging and offer better value, be more consistent. Number two, I didn't want to promote garbage anymore. I've done my fair share of reviews and product reviews, and I always made an effort to not promote things that I didn't myself use. But like companies are sketchy out there, they tell you this is the best X that you'll ever get. And then you promote it and 6 months later it breaks and you're like, shit.
Yeah.
And then number 3, I wanted not to do that anymore. I didn't want to just freak out about what I should film in life. I wanted just kind of a concrete thing. I do this and all the rest is for life. I want to be in the real world more and not look for opportunity everywhere.
Right. It is a balance though, we're also self-employed and it's like, we're still trying to figure out different ways to support ourselves. So yeah, I suspect that I'll go through all the phases that you've been through over the past 13 years, I'm sure. And
it's speeding up too. That's the other thing. Is like,
true.
If you look into it, a lot of I was on YouTube since 2007.
That's
and
wild.
Back then it was like cat videos and like, funny fails.
Yeah.
And then for a long time, nobody cared. Just nobody cared. They were like, this teenager did this. And like, my in-laws and I actually got into a 3-year fight because they thought I was just lazy and didn't want to work. And most people were like, what do you do? How do you make money?
Right.
And then around 2018, I just woke up one night or one day and people were like, oh my God, you're a YouTuber. That's amazing. Like something shifted in society where it became in.
Yeah.
And I think during that shift, a lot of money started pouring into YouTube. And so now a lot of these people that you see actually have a whole studio behind them. And they're producing 50 to 300 pieces of content every day. And somebody like me or somebody like you, we can't compete with that. And so how do you compete? You have to get really creative about it. I think one of the ways I've been competing is I create like a foraging video that people will go back to. So it's not just throwaway content. Like a short is like you watch it once, you'll never go back to it.
Right.
If I make a foraging video, like a lecture, record a lecture, essentially, people might watch it once. Then when they're foraging again, they might pull it up on their phone, watch it another time. And then after a long winter, they might watch it a third time. Yeah. And so that's another reason for the show.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So much good stuff there. I'm excited to go back and edit this just so I could kind of glean some new stuff and everything. That's one of the perks of being the editor of the show as well. So,
but I hope that I'm not discouraging you. This,
no, you're not.
Yeah, I got so many doors open for me being on YouTube. I experienced so many people's lives.
Totally.
I made one of John Callis's first videos, if not the first video. I was able to expose a lot of people to a lot of things. And the payment was that above money and everything else. Maybe I never bought the big house and the crazy supercars or whatever, which I never wanted anyway. But looking back, I have no regrets and I don't intend to stop. I'm just going to take my value and self-worth that I'm not getting from this, mix it with a little firefighting, and then I'll just be a better YouTuber.
Right. Yeah. New life experience. And honestly, Herb Rally was a self-sustaining business, so to speak, before the YouTube situation anyways. I kind of just look at it as a cherry on top and just another way to connect with the audience. And like you said, make new connections. And we're recording these as audio podcasts anyways. I might as well release a lot of these as the video on YouTube, but it's been a lot of fun. You were talking about like some of these YouTube channels may seem like they're like one person, but there's really a whole team behind them. I just found out there's a YouTube channel about YouTubers. It's called Channel Makers. And the creator, or one of the creators, I always thought it was just him the whole time, but it turns out there's this giant team behind him. And I'm like, oh, of course, that's how you pump out so much amazing high quality content.
I know YouTube Makers. Yeah, they have a whole bay of editors.
yeah, exactly.
And there's editors in other countries too. So they're working around the clock.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're just chopping. I mean, maybe not him specifically, but I know lots of other channels that kind of front like one person.
Right.
And then they have US based editors. And then when those editors go to sleep, they pass it off to somebody on a different time zone so that when they wake up, those pieces are already done.
Yeah. Well, Herbrel is just me and Amanda. So at least for now. Well, why don't we wrap up with a few, just kind of closing fun questions. I saw that Theo Vaughn shouted you out, and I was just wondering if you could tell me about that because that was hilarious.
I like Theo Vaughn. I respect him as a comedian. I love his podcast. I think he's a funny dude. He's very original, and he's helped me personally realize that how you be authentic is that you're just yourself. And I don't know how many times I needed to hear that before I actually heard it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I make the analogy sometimes. I go to the dentist and they're like, relax. And I'm like, I am relaxed. And then I'm like, actually, no, I'm clenching.
Right.
And so then I relax and then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm still clenching.
Yeah.
And then I relax and it just happens again and again. And so watching his show and listening to his podcast was very helpful in that regard.
Yeah.
And at one point, I just sent him a book and said, thank you so much. You really helped me. And then I forgot I ever did it. And like 3 years later, somebody's like, hey, you just shouted out your book. And so I obviously clipped it and had to brag a little bit.
Yeah. That is so epic. We watched at least part of his special. I want to say it was on Netflix. And yeah, he is just such an authentic dude. Yeah, I never really thought of that as an inspirational thing. But yes, looking at what he talks about, his background and everything, and just kind of owning it all and just turning it into just pure comedy.
Yeah. And to bring it back to foraging, you know, like
yeah,
he talks about some of his addiction issues and just some of the, he's very vulnerable. And you would think that that makes him weaker, but no, he's like a willow branch. He bends in the wind and he's stronger because of it.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Well, if you do, dear listener, want to watch Theo Von shout out Sergei's book, we'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. So also just kind of curious, do you have any fun new hobbies that you're into? Like you said, you're a very curious person. You do a lot of different things. Is there anything new and exciting you're currently into?
Absolutely. Well, number one, I'm rediscovering gardening now that we have land. This is something that I've done on and off in my life, and then coming back to it, very humbling because farming is a lot of work. Sometimes I joke I'm going to start a fitness class called Farm Fit, where I just have people do farm chores because it will work you.
Right.
And then another hobby that's new is hunting.
Oh, nice.
I started hunting a couple of years ago. I kind of came to it the opposite way. Usually people start eating a lot of meat, you know, in their life and then go and become vegetarians. I grew up as a raw food vegan and started eating more meat.
Yeah.
And in a funny way, foraging has been helping that. You know, I'm totally green. I just kind of fall in line and listen to what other hunters, more skilled hunters tell me. Yeah. And at the end of last year, everybody was getting frustrated because they weren't, you know, finding deer. And to be clear, we're using every piece of everything that we get because we're not in it for the trophy stuff. Right. Anyway, at the end of last year, on one of our last hunts, I was like, everybody was frustrated. They went in their own directions to blow off steam. And I thought, what if I just apply foraging concepts to this? Like, if you find the food, you might find the deer. And so I just started walking through the forest and looking for a creek bed. And I found some more lush areas and I started following the food. And I started finding more and more fresh deer poop. And I was like, holy crap, I think this is working. Kept going. About a half an hour later, my heart starts racing. And I don't really know why. And then all of a sudden, boof, there's 8 or 9 does just chilling in this meadow. And so I followed the food and I found the deer. And at that point, a buck sniffed me out and alerted the females and they all disappeared. But I've done that now 3 or 4 more times. And it's very interesting to watch. And I also have a bird dog, as I mentioned at some point. And so we've been just going out and looking for pheasants and grouse. And, you know, it's like my vegan self might have, I was always pretty good about mixing with who I interacted with, raw food people, vegan people. I never discriminated against meat eaters. I had lots of friends that were from all walks of life. But I think part of me never realized how much hunters love nature. I always just thought that they like killing things.
Drinking beer.
When I go hunting now, I get it. I finally get it. I was dumb. You wake up at the butt crack of dawn before the sun rises and you're out there. You're essentially hiking and backpacking completely alone, observing how everything is waking up. And it's truly magical. It makes me appreciate this world so much more. And I think it's like, it fits perfectly. It just plugs right into my life and adds to it.
Hunting does seem to have a high barrier to entry. I did not grow up in a hunting family, and I still have never hunted. I would definitely love to do it someday. My brother, actually, he just moved to Alaska and he's hunting all the time. And, you know, he's had a lot of experience because he used to be in, like, say, he was in the military, then he was also a police officer. So that's kind of embedded in that culture. So he was essentially taught how to hunt by other hunters way later in his life. And I'm just kind of curious, how did you get into it? And how did you find a hunting mentor, if you will?
Well, at the beginning of this, we started laughing about my friend Jason, who has a similar last name to you.
Yeah.
So he got me into it.
Nice.
He deserves all the credit, and he taught me how to be gun safe. And then I went on and took courses. And then my father-in-law hunts. He was a big influence in my life. And then just kind of when you start immersing yourself in that crowd, people see the ones that, people who don't mind working hard or having long days, and then they come reach out to you. And so I have a really great community around me. And so I feel grateful because I found them and they found me.
Yeah.
And, it's like, if you just approach any new skill with a little bit of the ability to listen, people love to teach. Everybody has something amazing to teach you. Yeah. And that's a huge thing that YouTube has taught me, that you just turn the camera on and start listening, and then you learn all kinds of crazy fun things, new hobbies and skills and secrets.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, good advice.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, I guess let's just finish with what's next for Sergei. You got the new audiobook out from your previous book that you wrote. What's next in the pipeline for you?
What's next in the pipeline? We might is a very strong word. We might be redesigning the Wild Edibles card deck.
Nice.
And then what's next is I start EMT school in 2 weeks.
Heck yeah.
And so I'm going to be going on this firefighter journey. And, I realized at some point that it was actually my childhood dream to be a firefighter.
Wow.
And when I was thinking about career shifts, I was like, holy crap. When I was 6, 7, 8, I wanted to be a firefighter. What if I just followed my childhood dream? So that adventure is really exciting. And I'm looking to see where I end up. Flying by the seat of my pants again.
I'm stoked for you, and we'll get to follow along on Boutenko films. Hopefully you document some of that at least, but you'll also have those wild edible test kitchen episodes still coming out. And man, I will
likely document some of that. I can't help it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You're a filmmaker at heart. So Sergei, this has been a lot of fun. It's I knew it was going to be fun, but we got into all sorts of topics I wasn't anticipating. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Mason. I had a great time too. Let's do it again.
Absolutely.
And when the episode launches, send it my way. I'll circulate it to the best of my abilities.
Appreciate that so much, man. Well, thanks y'all for listening, and thanks once again to Sergei. We'll see you in the next episode of the Herbalist Hour.
I like your hip hop track, by the way.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
So that was Torn Frost, and you may or may not have seen it yet, but I just interviewed him. We happened to stop in Seattle after a wedding, and it was so nice to actually meet him in person. And I love that track so much.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Thank you so much.
Right, have a wonderful day.
All right, take care, Sergei.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our Herb Rally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an Herb Rally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our Herb Rally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbrally.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.